Welcome, everyone, to episode 14 of the What Sales and Marketing Got to Do with It podcast. My name is Gemma Adair, founder and principal marketing consultant at Riada Consultancy. This podcast aims to delve deep into the minds of sales and marketing industry leaders, uncovering what keeps them up at night, what drives their passion, and how they execute successful strategies in both their personal and professional lives. I am delighted to welcome Craig Russell. He is the Azure Sales Director at Servant. Great to have you, Craig, on the podcast today.
Thank you, Gemma. Thanks for having me. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Perfect. And I can sense there's an accent. I can hear an accent there.
A little bit, yes, Glasgow accent. So yeah, it travels well. So yeah, yeah, try and speak nice and slow for people today on the podcast because I know sometimes I have a tendency to go quite fast. So I'll try and keep it as audible and clear as possible. But no, yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. So without further ado, please introduce who you are and what you do.
Okay, Craig Russell is my name, as you've said. I'm the Azure Sales Director at Servant, who are a Microsoft Cloud partner. I'm based in Glasgow. My career spanning nearly 25 years so far in the IT industry, starting off as an individual salesperson in HP, where I spent 4 or 5 years there, and then moved on to Dell for 5 years after that. Have a tendency of working for big global companies. You'll see a trend here developing as I go through my experience and background. Spent a number of years with Hitachi, talking about data, AI, about data center in the IT estate as well. Moved on to Veritas, which was the old kind of breakout company from Symantec, which was more about data protection and backup. And then spent very prosperous nearly 5.5 years with Microsoft. So working with them in a variety of different roles across Azure and the cloud, but Dynamics, Power Platform, Modern Workplace on Office 365. Then moved to another partner based in the UK, where I was looking after a team of 14 people as head of sales. Again, the top Microsoft partner based in Glasgow. And then my new role at Servant, been in the role for nearly 3 months now, which I'm immensely enjoying, which is heading up their Azure sales engine within the business. So yeah, exciting, a long list of different sales jobs, very different from individual sales roles to being, looking after a team. So, but a fair amount of experience, I think, with people with variety of different solutions in the marketplace, but probably too long probably too long in the sector when you look back at those 25 years. But yeah, it's been one hell of a journey. It's been an excellent experience for me working for maybe smaller companies and larger global companies, some of the big guns. But yeah, so it's been a good 25 years, and there's still a bit of life in me yet, I think.
And there's a lot of years behind you. Where do you think that was there anything that influenced you in getting into sales at that kind of, earlier on in your career? Where did it all kind of stem from, if it came from,
I think for me, I had a thirst for knowledge. I hate not knowing things, just generally outside of work as well. I like to be informed, and I like to kind of know things. And if I don't know things, I like to go and research them and skill up on them. So for me, a bit of a problem solver. If there's a problem with a customer, I like to get to know what that problem is. Why it's a problem for the customer, if it's keeping them awake at night, why that should be. And try and kind of, slot in solutions and outcomes that make businesses more prosperous and give them competitive edge or make a big difference to the way that they run their business. So for me, that from an early stage, I was really passionate about that, but also about people working collaboratively with teams to solve those problems. And yeah, that was really where it stemmed from. And then I took to it like a duck to water, really enjoyed it. And I think, that's probably where the kind of managing teams came from as well, in terms of seeing other people prosper, do really well, and working collaboratively with different parts of the business, solving problems for customers. I mean, that hasn't really changed in the 25 years ahead of when I first walked through the door at HP. Still exactly the same now. The challenges are different. They're maybe a bit bigger now than they were before, but yeah, it's still the ethos is still the same about, why is this a problem? How can we overcome this challenge? And, how do we get to an end solution that can be a good outcome for a customer?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think this quite rightly ties in with your mantra, people buy from people. I think it's very much so aligned with what you're saying there.
Absolutely, and I've taken this with me over many years. Despite being, kind of moving on to different companies, I've kept great relationships with people that I used to work with in previous roles, and people that certainly had an impact on me in terms of molding me and shaping me into the sales manager and executive that I am today. So yeah, it is a people business, and I think sometimes you have to get to really understand what makes people tick and adapt the conversation as well, depending on who you're speaking to. Because when you're speaking to a customer, an HR person is going to be very interested in different things than a sales and marketing person is, or a finance person. So it's having the kind of ability to tailor that conversation a little bit more and try and kind of show a bit of empathy, I think, as well, because that's really, really important. I think that's maybe what's missed, if I can be
Mm,
honest, in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. I think prior to COVID, certainly it was there wasn't much empathy in sales. It was very hard as straight
yeah.
down the middle. And yeah, I think there's a lot more kind of openness and transparency now. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been about getting to understand people, what makes them tick, what gets them out of bed in the morning, whether it's a team that you're managing or whether it's your colleagues or my fellow kind of executives in the industry that I've connected with over the last 25 years.
So what would you say, I know you've mentioned some of the characteristics actually of a, what makes a good sales professional or leader. You mentioned some of the characteristics there, which I totally agree with. Anything else that you would like to add to that?
Curious listening, I think, is a big thing. So being curious about listening, asking lots of questions. I think, sometimes in the industry, people are too quick to jump in with a solution that they already have in their head for the customer. But you have to really understand that customer, what the problem is, why it's important to them, and really get to the bottom of that. So for me, it's about, listening as much as possible, but in a curious way so that you gather that information. Because I think when you speak to a lot of customers in different sectors, there can be some nuances to the problem that they
Mm,
have.
yeah.
But generally, you recognise a lot of consistency, a lot of similar things. So you can apply that knowledge, to a new customer, even if it's a different solution that you're selling. Because I think at the end of the day, customer doesn't really care too much about what the solution is, as long as it gives them the outcome, the desired
Mm,
outcome, then they're happy with that. So for me, it's being really, really listening. I've always said, one mouth, 2 ears. You have to listen, and then when you speak, you have to replay that back to whoever you're talking to, whether it's a professional conversation or a private conversation with family or friends. You have to listen, replay that back, show that
mm.
you've understood the problem, and then you have the right to then say, okay, well, this is what I think we should do, or this is my opinion on it. So yeah, so I tend to kind of not say a lot initially until I can understand what that issue is or that problem, or I've got a grasp of what the customer is trying to achieve. At that point, then it's time to kind of maybe grab the bull by the horns, have the conversation with the customer, and give an opinion on what you think should be done. So that's the big thing for me.
No, that's perfect. Um, have you faced challenges in your sales career, and what have those challenges been, and how have you overcome them?
I think the challenge is working for some of the larger organizations are you have multiple teams, you have so many different people. If you look at a virtual team, you can have sometimes 5, 6, 7 people in a virtual team. That's quite difficult to coordinate that team, and get them kind of pushed
Mm,
in the right direction and get them all working for one common cause. So that took a bit of experience for me to kind of overcome, and it took me quite a number of years, I think, to really kind of grapple with that and understand the best way to approach it, because it changes depending on who you're working for, what teams you're engaging with. So yeah, I find that was at Microsoft, I was able to kind of master that because I was working for companies like Dell and HP, where I was working with so many different people in a team environment. So I think that challenge has been, and that challenge still presents itself today, to be honest, but albeit in a different format. But for me, it's about, right, how do you work with people to get the best from them, but also kind of understand what the challenges are by trying to lead basically a minibus full of salespeople, marketing people, and other technical people to kind of, to drive them towards an end goal. So I mean that's been a challenge certainly with it, particularly early on in my career. And if I'm being honest about that, it's trial and error. Sometimes, you learn from your mistakes, and then you think, okay, I need to make sure that I don't do that again. And I had some great mentoring and some great coaching early on in my career from some quality, experienced people in the industry that I really valued. And you take that on board. You try and eradicate some of the kinks, if you like, that you have in your kind of personality, and you focus on the other things that get results. So yeah, that's been one challenge, I think, and it's an ongoing challenge. I think, we're working at the minute with my current role with Microsoft really extensively. And I think, we're working with a variety of different teams, leadership teams. So again, that experience, that knowledge has come in really handy to be able to apply that in this role.
No, that's great. And we'll come on to that whole kind of sales and marketing a bit later in the conversation. But what does a day in the life of Craig look like? Perhaps both personal and professional. Tell us more.
So from a professional point of view, it's very much, new into a role with a new company. It's very much about planning, and being organised. So at the minute, it's trying to think, right, the day ahead or the week ahead, what does that look like? For me, I've probably, now that I'm a bit more experienced, I tailor that a bit more so that I do some of that activity in bursts. So rather than doing it, kind of for an hour, 2 hours at a time, I tend to do it 20-minute bursts, and then have a bit of variety by doing other things around it, different things, so that
Interesting.
you have a bit of variety to the day, rather than just having, okay, from 9 till 12 this morning, I'm going to sell. So I do a lot of planning. I do a lot of strategy stuff at the moment in my current role, to make sure that, the end goal isn't being, missed in all of the day-to-day routine stuff that goes on. So there's a fair amount of planning there. I think, collaboration with the team. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on in my current role about trying to understand people, whether it's the technical background that they have, whether it's marketing, whether it's HR, working with those teams, and learning as much as possible
Mm,
from them. So I mean, for me, as I said, the thirst for knowledge is a really big thing. There's still lots that I don't know, and that frustrates me a little bit sometimes. But if I look at what I know now and what I knew when I walked in the door at Servant, massive difference between, I have to lie down in a cold dark room sometimes and think to myself, I can't believe that I've just had that conversation. But it's been, if that continues over the months ahead, then, the learning curve is going to be very steep, and, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Outside of work, I'm a keen tennis player. I've been playing tennis since I was the age of 4. So
amazing.
tennis for
Oh,
me is a big
brilliant.
thing. Family are a big tennis nuts as well. So yeah, a big thing of what we're doing is, on a weekly basis, that's a good de-stressing mechanism to go and hit some tennis balls. And I represent my local club. Currently the captain of my local club, Clarkson Tennis Club. So I'm involved in the committee and involved in the running of that club as well. So tennis has always played an active part of my kind of, outside of work activities, and that's been great to have that, because I think everyone needs that, whether it's cooking or a sport or something else, because it's nice to have that distraction sometimes, because it's healthy to have that balance.
Awesome. And just out of curiosity, do you start your day at a certain time? Do you have a morning ritual or something like that that kind of kickstarts your day?
Well, for me, this is going to sound a bit kind of out there, but I do like to pump up the volume in some music first thing in the morning, just to get
Love
me kind of motivated. So usually
it.
it's about 7:30 in the morning, much to the amusement of my children in the house. But no, there's some music that goes on just to get everyone up and get everyone motivated, and then it's, yeah, spend
Brilliant.
some time with the kids, in the morning, get them to school, and then it's, very much kind of, game face on for the day ahead. So I've got some time in the morning, usually the first hour, where I just, look at what I have coming up, do some
Yeah.
preparation for the day, anything else that maybe is coming up later in the week that needs a bit more kind of, thought in advance rather than on the day of the meeting. So there's a lot of that goes on. But yeah, I mean, no 2 days are the same at the moment, which is great. So there's the superb amount of variety, which is fantastic. But yeah, music usually motivates me, gets me going. So that if that doesn't work, then nothing will.
Seems to me that that probably energy in the sort of morning time is quite a good one, you know, after you listen to some music and that kind of that burst. Would you say that your energy kind of dips in the afternoon, towards the afternoon, maybe after lunch, that
I
kind of
think you
thing?
can do after you've eaten something, yeah, for lunch. So I mean, for me at that point, I usually like to just go and get some fresh air, go for a quick walk or something, or just go and do something different just to have a break. You know, I think we're all really busy at the moment, and I think, you
Yeah,
know, probably on the back of COVID and the pandemic as well, that people are working a lot more hours than they worked before because they don't have the commute, they don't have, you know, the kind of lunch to go and you know, get a coffee and a
yeah,
lunch sandwich somewhere. So for me, it was really important to replace that with something. So whether it's, for example, replace it with a game of tennis for half an hour, or whether it's, you know, to replace the commute with going to the gym or something like that, really important to do that, because otherwise I think you end up just working far too much and burn out, as we've seen from so many people and so many people I've spoken to, is a real thing. And so that's really where the bursts of energy come from, the 20-minute bursts or half an hour bursts. So for me, that's like if I've got a couple of projects or a strategic thing that I need to do, but I'm going to focus on that for half an hour. And then I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing this morning. And then this afternoon, I'll take another half an hour to continue that and complete it. So for me, that's you know, probably the best way to keep it fresh. But you know, it's so busy at the moment in my current role that I think you need that kind of, you know, just take a step away for a few moments. And so yeah, doing a bit of walking, or even just maybe even put some music on again. I've done that a couple of times as well. You know, after lunch, music back on, a couple of songs, cup of coffee, and then you're back at it in the afternoon. But yeah, the days do change. I think it depends on your workload as well and what you're doing. If you have the variety, you know, then you probably feel like, you know, you can get through the day. But you know, I'm not a big fan of doing back to back
yeah.
Microsoft Teams calls, and you know, I think that we try and avoid that if possible. Although sometimes you do get days like that. That's just the way that that things pan out. But yeah, it's, I think you usually get that kind of 2 o'clock, 2:30, kind of like, okay, feeling a bit jaded now. You know, need a bit of an energy boost. So yeah. Usually music helps with that first thing in the morning, and you know, after lunch as well.
After lunch, I have to ask, is there a particular tune or song or genre
Anything
that you
dancey really
play?
for me. So I did a bit of DJing when I was younger.
Ah,
So you know, anything kind of dancey or house music related
oh, brilliant.
is really good for me. So that usually gets me, gets me going. So but yeah, that's kind of the genre, if you like.
Yeah,
When I was DJing many years ago, I kind of, that music just seemed to be right for the moment, you know, whether you wanted to dance or whether you wanted to do something or motivate yourself. And
yeah.
when I did some traveling and worked in Sydney for a period of time for 6 months on a working holiday visa, worked for a company where they took you into the office in the morning and they had this big ghetto blaster and they basically put on the tunes at 7:30 to get everyone motivated. And everyone was like, oh God, there's the music on. And I was the only one that was like, yeah, come on, let's go, let's do this. So yeah, so it does work.
I think it sounds like my kind of office, actually.
Yeah.
I would
More a nightclub
absolutely
than the
love
office,
that.
but
That would be like, yeah, I'm in the office, and you know, it would encourage me actually to be in the office just for that fact, you know.
yeah.
Is there an area of sales that you like the most? And is there an area of sales that you like the least, or perhaps challenging or whatnot? But what do you like the most?
I think the area I like the most is maybe speaking to a new customer. You haven't spoken to them before, and you're getting to know their business and their problems, and you know, and you're just gathering that information and doing the curious listening, as I said earlier on. That's the fun part, because that's really putting yourself in the customer's shoes and understanding, you know, kind of what the problems and their priorities are. So really enjoy that, and then building a kind of strategy around that. I really like the strategy sessions that I've been
Mm,
doing all throughout my career, thinking about the longer term. So the short term is important, of course it is, but there's always a long term. There's always something like, what's the end goal in the next 12 months or 24 months. So any strategic conversations with customers, I love. I always like to kind of plan for those. The part that I don't like is probably the waiting for an order, waiting for a purchase order. You know, somebody said to me a few months ago, waiting is not a sales activity, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you're in that kind of area of, right, you know, I really need this order, and you know, it's a big deal for you perhaps, and you're thinking, right, I'm not quite sure when it's coming, or and you do feel bad sometimes about chasing and chasing, but that's the job that we're in. We have to do it. So that's the area I don't like. I like to have everything lined up, and I like to be in control of things. And I think, when you're waiting on something, or the kind of expectations on the customer side,
Yeah.
to issue a purchase order or to give you the go ahead or the green light on something, I don't particularly like those conversations, because I'm quite impatient, and generally not a good waiter.
That's a good what you like least example for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
From your experience, what are the misconceptions that people have about sales?
I think there's a lot more kudos that goes into, I would say, that the solution selling now, or the selling that actually has the business element as well as a solution element, or a kind of, how can I put it? I think there's probably two areas that were very distinct and very different before, about selling into a company, whether it's IT or anything else, probably for that matter. You have the business side, and then you have obviously the solution or the IT side. I think about 7 or 8 years ago, what happened was those two um, distinct, separate parts of the business operated very distinctly different from each other. They did their own thing. There wasn't any tie-in between business and IT. It was very separate. Then we had this kind of, IT and technology boom, where, companies were realizing that the business had to be talking about IT, and IT had to be talking about the business, because at the end of the day, the two were intrinsically linked. And companies that weren't were missing out, and very siloed in their decision making, and didn't necessarily prosper so much. So I think that one of the misconceptions about that was that, selling a solution, if you like, was just selling to IT. And there is an element of that, but I think the selling of a service or solution has to include the business side. I don't think salespeople generally get enough credit for trying to pull in the business side of that conversation, as well as the IT side, because that's a very different conversation that a lot of salespeople wouldn't have traditionally had in the
Yeah.
past. So that's where, for me, that thirst for knowledge again was understanding, like, what's the really important thing to that sales and marketing manager, and why is it important, and why is it different to the person that's in the legal department. So
Mm.
taking all that information, replaying it back to a customer to say, right, you've told me this, I've listened to this, here's the solution for this, Mr. Sales and Marketing Manager, or Mrs. Sales and Marketing Manager, this is what you've told me, I'm replaying this back. And you take all those different component parts. And I think sometimes that's like plate spinning, that's difficult, and it can be consuming, really kind of time consuming as well. Some of the solutions that I've been selling in the past, like Dynamics on the Microsoft platform, I mean, some of that's 12, 18 months sales cycle.
Yeah.
That's a long sale, and it's a real technical sale sometimes, but it's a real, business sale, because that's, if you have a conversation with a customer about their front end applications that are their main revenue generating applications, and their back end applications, which are basically the finance applications, those are the applications that are core to the business. If you
Yeah.
understand those applications, you pretty much understand how a customer works, and you've got the keys to the castle in terms of, right, I really get this customer now. So I think that planning of that, and that sitting back and saying, right, this is how I'm going to approach this. This is how I'm going to speak to this. Is how I'm going to tailor that conversation differently. I think sometimes people think it's just a sales conversation, the same conversation you have with everyone, and it's really not. You really have to think about it. You've really got to kind of, give yourself the extra time to say, right, why is somebody going to want to speak to me about this?
Mm.
I think that sometimes we don't get enough credit for those types of conversations.
That makes a lot of sense, because there's the functional areas is one thing, the job titles, seniority is another thing, and then you throw industry into the mix of things, and messaging, terminology, all of that. You've got to kind of tailor the conversation.
Yeah, if I look at where we're engaged in my current role across 13 different sectors, so those sectors are very different and very varied in terms of, some of the trends and themes that you see across them. And the good kind of analogy, or the good phrase that I used to use, was, when you're speaking to these customers about what's happening in their sector, we used to say, look, this is what your brothers and sisters are having for breakfast this week, Mr. Customer, because they like to know that sector specific kind of expertise. But sometimes, though, it doesn't have that nuance. Sometimes it can be very different. Sometimes customers are just looking for somebody else, maybe geographically, or somebody else that's in the same situation as them, they don't care too much about what sector it is. But yeah, for me, there's nuances to it definitely, but it's interesting being across so many sectors. You do get, you know, a good understanding of, right, okay, you know, this is a very different complex problem than, you know, I was dealing with last week.
Yeah, definitely. And then regions, different regions as well, countries, whether it's UK or, international, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely.
I'm a firm believer in sales and marketing alignment. What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree 100% with that. I think where I've been successful in the past and looking at, you know, solutions that we take to a certain industry, marketing has to be an extension of sales and vice versa, have to be aligned because, you know, you can talk to a customer from a sales perspective about a solution, but you have to talk to the customer as well about how it's marketed, and how you position that to a customer, why it's important to them from that end of the spectrum as well. So yeah, I've worked very closely in previous roles with marketing teams to make sure that, you know, sales are not siloed and going off and doing their own thing, because that can be detrimental. And
Yeah.
again, that's where the collaboration with wider teams comes in. You know, you have to make sure that, you know, you're sharing your strategies with the marketing team. You're talking about what the trends and themes are that you're seeing in a sector, because that's important. You know, and sometimes it's you know, customers say, I want to know where else you've done this in the banking sector or with another manufacturing firm. So, you know, it can be relevant sometimes. But for me, it's that's been one of the really interesting parts of the role, is learning that kind of marketing lens as well, and how to then kind of bring that into the conversation with a customer. And a lot of the time, I think sometimes marketing people can be unconscious salespeople, you know, because I think they're not aware that they're selling, but they kind of are. And customers see
Yeah.
that as a non-threatening thing as well. So sometimes, you know, that can have a really positive effect, as it can with, you know, maybe technical roles or architects or, you know, other roles within the organization, but marketing particularly, because I think good marketing people will sit down with their sales engine and say, right, you know, we are one, you know, and we need to look at, like,
Yes.
what does the strategy look like, so that, you know, we're complementing each other. So
Yeah.
would agree with your statement, you know, 100%.
Definitely. Yeah, no. It's music to my ears, Craig. Music to my ears. You talked about trends there, market and so on. How do you keep abreast of what's happening in your market industry, that kind of thing?
So I think it's speaking to colleagues first and foremost, you know, because they're the ones that talk to customers all day about projects and about things that are happening and problems. So I mean, that's a good soundboard for that. I think I've got an extensive network outside of my current role, where there's enough people doing different roles in different sectors with different companies. So again, that's really valuable. But just keeping abreast of the news as well, really, you know, and reading up on, you know, kind of what's topical at the minute, what's changing. And it's a thankless task, to be honest, because it's so busy at the minute, so many different sectors, and the IT sector and the technology kind of sector, particularly around Microsoft solutions at the
Yeah,
minute, is moving so fast.
it
You know,
is.
it feels like every day there are new functionality, new things coming into the Azure platform. It certainly felt like that with Dynamics. You know, it was every day was a learning day. But yeah, for me, it's just really important. You don't necessarily need to be across everything, but you just need to understand, you know, at a high level, what is it, how important is it, what does that mean for me, and why should a customer care about it?
Yeah.
So usually, you know, I've had several conversations with customers over the last few months where I've just said to them, look, this is a new thing. Why is that important to you? What does that mean? Is that a challenge, or is that something? Usually, the customers will talk about it and, you know,
Mm,
give you the inside track. So, but yeah, all that knowledge is, you know, hopefully retained by me and kept as kind of muscle memory somewhere, so that when another customer mentions something, you can say, oh yeah, I've spoken to another customer in this sector about that, and this is what they said. Is that a similar challenge for you, or would you agree with that? So yeah, so I mean, I do like to be challenged quite a lot. So I think, you know, in the current role that I've got with the wider teams, there's definitely a, you know, challenge me. If you think otherwise, or you think differently, then let's kind of have that conversation. But yeah, that would be my answer to that, I think.
No, that's brilliant. And just sales, having a sales career going into the profession, what advice would you give someone that's perhaps, interested to go on that sales journey? Whether they're young or they've maybe graduated, come out of uni, or perhaps they just want to change it up. What advice would you give them if someone wanted to get into sales?
Do it, because it's a fantastic sector to get into, first and foremost. You learn so much. I mean, if I look at my first few years at Dell and at HP, I mean, I was this nervous kind of youngster walking into the office thinking, I'm not quite sure if this is right for me. But I would say just try and kind of understand as much about the sector as you can, ask as many questions as possible. It's okay not to know things as well, because,
Mm,
sometimes I think the sales profession gets a bit of a bad name for people saying things and not maybe really understanding what they're saying, or maybe kind of not being able to back that up. So I think sometimes it's okay to say to a customer, to say to a colleague, I don't know, but I'll
yeah.
find out for you. I'll go and find out and I'll get you the answer. So leave it with me rather than giving them an answer that maybe you're unsure of. So yeah, I'd say ask lots of questions, be honest, be transparent as well, because that's certainly, again, a quality that I think gets you far in a sales career. It really does. Being honest and upfront with customers and colleagues. In terms of other things to think about, have fun. You have to
Yeah.
have the fun element in it, because let's be honest, it's dull and boring if you just focus and work all day and there's no other fun element. So a big part of what I've done throughout my career is the humour part of it, and
Yeah.
again, people buy from people. People probably tell you bad sense of humour about me, but no, but definitely kind of having a sense of humour where you leave an impact when you have a conversation with a customer. The customer remembers you, they remember your name, the company you're representing, the conversation. That makes a difference. So I'd say leave a mark on somebody, and just continually ask questions, because this industry is so fast at the moment that
Mm,
the questions are coming thick and fast. So just keep learning. But yeah, I would say absolutely do it, because the sector at the moment too is really changing in terms of the type of people that are coming through to do sales. And I think, as I said earlier on about that business element,
yeah.
looking at kind of business outcome focused, that's a big part of the role now. I think that sales I've been asked to do. Um, and that's probably where a lot of the enjoyment, a lot of the fun comes from, and a lot of the kind of really interesting stuff. Because when you get to know how a company operates,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
that gives you a lot of valuable insight, rather than just selling a solution to a customer, or to a to an end customer. So yeah, I think that would be my response for that.
I agree. I agree with that. Getting to know how a company operates, and likewise for that leader or founder or team that you're sort of working with.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe maybe
Rejection.
maybe maybe
Yeah.
find a mentor as well, or somebody
Yeah.
from a coaching perspective. I mean, if I look at the first 5-7 years in my role when I joined the sector, I was probably a bit of a pest, where I was like, I don't understand this. What is this? Right? Okay, what does that do? Why does it do that? Lots of questions to the point where I said, look, I wanted somebody as a coach and a mentor for the first kind of few years to lean on with that. And it's some great people around me. I was really very fortunate with some quality sales leaders and management teams, who kind of, very much helped me and shape that, and mold that kind of thinking. So yeah, find somebody who's been there and done it quite a lot, to get, the experience drip fed, into you, so that you get to know it, and you can learn, because that can accelerate, your from a sales journey, that can accelerate you in a massive big jump forward, rather than just trying to do it all yourself and learn it all yourself without that help.
Makes a lot of sense. Rejection plays a big part in sales, or should I say through life, should I say
Yep.
in
Yep.
general, right? How how do you overcome rejection, or what's been your experience with rejection in your profession?
So there's a good Japanese proverb here that's knock down 7 times, stand up eight. Is
Ah,
the proverb. So basically, that's about rejection and being told no, and and having to deal with really kind of overcoming challenges.
yeah.
So I think you've got to learn to fail. It's
Mm,
important. I think you have to get into the mindset of learning to fail, so that when you know you've failed on something, you know where you've failed. So you then take that knowledge and you use it in the next engagement or the next customer kind of conversation. So it's not a weakness. You can turn it into a positive, but you have to be able to recognize, okay, that's where I went wrong. It's a learning experience. I won't do that again. I'll do it this way differently moving forward, so that you turn it into a positive there. So Yeah, rejection is just part of the role, isn't it? But I think you can the way you deal with it, the way you bounce back. You have to be thick-skinned. You have to have a positive attitude with these things. It's not for the faint-hearted being a salesperson, especially in this sector. But I think it's important to when you lose something or something doesn't go your way, to be able to kind of deal with it and recognize why that's happened. So yeah, that's a big part of the learning. But you learn the hard way, unfortunately, by making mistakes, and then you kind of learn moving forwards that, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to have a different approach, or whatever it may be. So that would be, yeah, and that's a really, really important point, actually. I think because a lot of people don't like talking about, well, these are
Yeah.
the deals that I could have landed that I didn't, or didn't happen for me, or this engagement that went wrong. I'm a big fan of doing wash-ups on engagements when you lose them,
Mm.
because we
Yeah,
say, okay, do we recognize where this went wrong? And then putting, maybe as a sales leader, you can put processes or things in place, to then guardrails in place to make sure that you don't do that again. So yeah, unfortunately, that's part and parcel of the job.
definitely. And I think as a marketing consultant, one of the things, or as marketing as a whole, to go back over opportunities, and if it's a lost, having that discussion, why was it lost, and just having that open, transparent discussion. There might be many factors which might have played a part in why that opportunity deal was lost. So
Yeah, yeah.
and I think you can learn a lot, like you said, as a team. How can we do better, and kind of learn from each other, and you know it's, yeah, incredible what can come out of those discussions.
The good sales leaders, I think, will look at that proactively and say, okay, this is not representative of pulling out individuals and making
Yes,
an
yes.
example of them. This is collectively as a team, because when you're looking after such a big team, you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone's doing the same behaviours, and everyone's kind of pulling in the right direction for you. So yeah, that's a good way to do that, to recognise, okay, there's a couple of people here that we can bring in, we can do a bit of training, or we can align them to a mentor or a coach, and we can then get them to kind of make sure that that's an area that they don't focus so much on, and they focus instead over here, and that's a much more positive outcome for them. So yeah, and I think that's, again, that just tends to be experience. I've seen some very experienced sales individuals make some really, I'd say, fatal mistakes, but then actually be really comfortable with the mistake, because they think, okay, well, I know that was that moment there. That was when
Mm,
that happened, and that was wrong. And they're okay that they managed to square it off with themselves, which takes a lot of doing. There's been some big deals that I've been working on with other salespeople where the impact to management, the impact to the company, you're talking multi-million pound deals.
yeah.
But I think it's an important part to be able to look back and go, okay, that was wrong, but I've learned from that, and then making sure that if you've got a team around you, that when you see those behaviours again, you can keep them on the straight and narrow.
Definitely. And I think it's very telling of the sales leader, the organization, the kind of culture that they want to kind of build and create. So I definitely think, everyone's learning, and there's different levels, different people come into sales at different levels. So it's kind of being cognizant of that, and yeah, just kind of mentoring and kind of ensuring they learn from mistakes and so on.
And you
Yeah.
want the different complexion of sales teams as well. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want it to be one dimensional. You value that. I mean, if I remember when we were looking at hiring in a previous role, we were taking people out of sector because we wanted that fresh set of eyes, people who didn't know the industry well, who came in with a different approach. And you think
Yeah.
that's really refreshing. I really like that, rather than, you know, the same responses you get to the same problems from people who'd been in the industry for 10, 15, 20 years. So that's why I think, we were hiring a lot of people out from different sectors and bringing them in, because they were saying, well, I wouldn't do it this way, I would do it this way, and this is how I would focus on this, and do things a bit differently, which was great because that produced results.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So sales is the now, is current for you.
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't really know. I started off doing a little bit of work in insurance. So my dad had his own insurance broker company. So I
Oh,
did a little bit of work in insurance for a while and didn't really take to that, to be honest. So although I tried it, I thought, well, it's probably not that. But I was one of these kind of young guys growing up where I wasn't really sure. Lots of things interested me, but I couldn't really kind of put my finger on what it was that I wanted to do. And then, when I got the interview for the HP job and sat down and thought, this is really exciting. I really like this, and working with teams and kind of lots of different things. I thought, yeah, this is a good starting point. So yeah, so I didn't have a clue. Really not a great answer. Sorry, you probably expected to say, well, I
No, no,
wanted to
no,
do
it's
this,
great. No, it's
but
great.
no,
Carry on,
I
carry
really
on.
didn't know. And for me, it was like, okay, try lots of things and see what sticks. And luckily for me, the HP role came up. The interview went really well, and I just found my feet very quickly. Was working in a great team with a really supportive management team at the time, and yeah, and I've not really looked back since. But yeah, it's kind of weird to think of it like that. You kind of go into a job interview and you're thinking, I really have no idea how this is going to go or whether this is what I want to do or not. So, but I'm glad it did work out like that, because it's been a really fruitful kind of 25 years in the industry that I've thoroughly enjoyed. And yeah, definitely that's looking back on that first job interview. I mean, if that didn't happen, could have been a very different road for me and very different kind of career outside of sales.
Yeah, no, definitely. Which brings me on to my next question around what is your passion in life and what drives you?
So my passion is people. I love working with people, and I love getting to know different types of people. So, working in that team environment, collaborating with different people, it's great. It's fantastic. I mean, that's one of the best perks of the job. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I think the passion, as well, as we've talked about earlier on, is, making a difference for a customer. A customer saying, I spoke to Craig and he's been speaking to me about this solution. This is what the difference that it made to our business. He gets our business. He understands our challenges, and I get a bit of a kick out of that, because at the end of the day, you can see a brand or a or a person, and you think, yeah, that was something that I did. That's the impact that I did and I had on that person. Coaching and myself, because of that mentoring that I got, pay it forward and pass it down to other people as well. So I love getting to know, kind of different sales approaches and strategies with people, sitting with them and getting them to learn about, how to kind of tailor a conversation, or selling to different rooms of the house as well, in terms of looking at different parts of the business, and as we said earlier on, tailoring that conversation differently. So I love being able to help people with that, and just unlocking problems generally. That's really a big part of kind of what I do at the minute for businesses, and I love that. That's just I've got a real passion for that, and working with people to to kind of provide solutions that make a difference to businesses, give them competitive edge, make them more efficient, whatever it may be.
No, that's great. I think a lot of great value, impact, ooze, all of that and more. So it definitely comes out from what you've just said there. Is there somebody that inspires you, dead or alive?
Ooh. I'm a fan of a motivational quote, or a kind of a kind of speech, a kind of something that you look at in terms of a quote and you think, well, that's had an impact.
Mm,
Um, C.S. Lewis, perhaps,
yeah,
the
yeah,
English author. So a lot of quotes about, starting from where you are now and changing the result, rather than looking back and thinking, what if? So I think, some of the quotes that C.S. Lewis has given spoke to me about, just trying to kind of, one, make a difference, but two, not being too analytical about things. So yeah, and that comes into a lot of the strategy conversations that I have on a daily basis when I am now at Servant. And I think the team always say to me, you like a Japanese proverb or a motivational quote, but I do, because it's like, I think it makes it quite relevant. But C.S. Lewis for me was a big one. I've used two or three of his quotes in the past with sales teams to get them motivated, or to give a bit of perspective, particularly around overcoming challenges, being more strategic, getting out of the traditional day job and doing things that have a wider impact.
yeah.
So I would say, yeah, probably that. I've always taken an interest in C.S. Lewis from quite a young age, but I think now these quotes start to really resonate with me, and that's probably why I use them in some of my sales meetings with the teams that I'm working with at the minute, or I've been working with in the past.
That's awesome. I think I'm smiling because I'm like, I want to be in one of them sales meetings.
Yeah, yeah.
Quotes, I'll have quotes all day, you know.
I get
I
collective
love
eye
all
roll
that.
from the team on yet more motivational slides about things. But I think stuff like that does make a difference for me. I think you want to kind of almost like take the traditional part of sales away and do something different. Because it's a stressful job, and it's
Mhm.
there's a lot to do, and I think that there's a lot of pressure that comes with it as well. So the way to relieve
Definitely.
that pressure is to be a bit different with your approach. Sense of humor and personality is a big part of it as well. And as I say, having fun. If you don't enjoy what you do, it's a long, tough slog. So you have to inject a bit of humor into things, and that's what keeps me going at the moment.
Definitely. And I think when you work for an amazing organization thrown into that mix, it's like the icing on the cake, really. Um,
Yeah.
which is important. If you could speak to your younger self, what would you say to them?
Don't be so shy. Don't be so nervous. It'll be all right. I mean, to think to myself now that it'd stand up in front of a room of 20, 30, 40 people and do a presentation, back then would have scared the living daylights out of me. But it's amazing how kind of you do the role and you just you grow. I mean, I was quite a
Mm.
shy person at school. I wasn't confident, I wouldn't have said, in certain situations, public situations, and in a class full of pupils or in a room full of people, I was very, very quiet. And you look at how you grow as a result of the job that you're doing, and that presentation aspect. And I really enjoy that now, actually. I really enjoy standing up and talking to people in the room and presenting, and kind of the bigger the audience is, almost like a kind of challenge. So I really, really like that part of it. But to think that 25 years ago that's what I was going to be doing. I mean, I was really worried about saying the wrong thing, and I was really nervous. But I'd probably go back and say, look, it's okay. You'll learn so many things, and you'll be able to adapt. You'll be able to grow, um,
Mm,
and the skills that I've learned, um, have been valuable, to not just from the kind of professional side, but also I think the tennis aspect coming into it. I'm very competitive. I think you're competitive in sport, that comes across in business as
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
there's definitely lots of studies that say that there's an intrinsic link between people who are competitive, who don't like to lose, who are that definitely is an element of that coming through. So I think I recognise that kind of competitive edge in sport kind of seeping through into the professional capacity.
No, that's brilliant. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
That's a difficult one. Well, I would like to think with the current role with a bigger team, growing that team and growing the organisation, with more people reporting to me, and with a kind of bigger team that are focused on Microsoft solutions and very successful, partner and servant. So I think that would be probably the first thing. Secondly, I think from a role perspective, I don't know, probably very similar to what I'm doing at the moment, but just a bigger team. I enjoy dipping into the sales opportunities, and and being kind of very strategic on sales as well. I don't see that changing too much. I can see me probably, yeah, just looking to really deliver on the growth aspirations that we have in the current role. I think I don't really have any aspirations to do anything fundamentally different. But I mean, a year is a long time in this industry. So, 5 years time seems like an eternity away, but it'll be interesting to see where we get to. I'm certainly really, really enjoying, my current role, and I can see a lot of huge potential in it. So I think if we just continue to realize that potential, grow the teams, and the relationships that we have with Microsoft, it'd be nice to look back in like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years and say, look, that was a team of 6 people, and we took it to a team of 10 people, 15 people, and grew that. And I think that's probably, yeah, that would be a nice achievement, to be able to look back and say, from these small acorns, we were able to, turn the business into this type of partner, which would be great. So yeah, that's the aspiration.
Perfect. And you never know, you might take up DJing again. Your pants went.
Well, I've still got my decks and my records. I still have them. They're in my basement, so they're still there. I don't know if they work or not, but yeah, we've got something to fall back on, I suppose, if it all goes pear-shaped.
Definitely change it up in the mornings when you play the music when it comes from your decks in the
Yeah,
morning. So that would be
yeah.
funny for the
I don't think the
family
neighbours will
to.
be too pleased about that, but
What do you want to be remembered by?
I think for making a difference. I think for really making a difference in terms of, kind of either building teams or coaching somebody or making a difference, to them personally. I mean, the people thing again comes through. I want people to say, look, I sat with Craig and he was a mentor or a coach, and I was this person. Now I've turned into this person, and I'm doing this role, and I'm growing and I'm learning so much. So I think again, I get a kick out of that in terms of people developing and in their career, and whether it's in sales or whether it's in something else. So I think I want to be remembered for making an impact, having a lasting impact in people's careers, whatever they decide to do, because people that were I was being mentored by had a fundamental impact in where I am today and what I'm doing. So I think I want to pass that on to, particularly I would say kind of younger generation as well, who come through university graduates at the moment into this sector that feels a very different sector than it was 20, 25 years ago, and it can be quite daunting. But certainly if I can help them plot a path
Mm.
to being successful and to give them a head start, then it's mission accomplished.
No, that's amazing. Sounds brilliant. Is there any books, podcasts, anything like, do you have a little toolkit which kind of helps with like mindset or anything that interests you?
Yeah, so I do like meditating. I do feel that helps with the pressures and everything else that's going on at the moment. So I mean, I do take some time to do that. In terms of podcasts, a lot of the Microsoft podcasts or other kind of podcasts that are out about kind of keeping abreast of like new solutions and new kind of solutions coming to the market and that type of thing. John Saville's Azure podcasts from Microsoft are really good for me, just to doing bite-sized chunks to listen to, because again, it's everything's a learning kind of experience when you're in the Azure sector, because it's so fast and it's so dynamic. So I feel as if you have to kind of constantly be researching and learning. I do like listening to a lot of kind of sports quotes from people and sports interviews. So obviously, kind of the tennis aspect, you won't be surprised to hear I'm really interested in Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, Andy Murray. I've read their books.
Oh,
Really,
brilliant.
really interesting to get that kind of competitive
Mm.
aspect, because I think when you understand what's in the psyche of some of the really kind of elite sports professionals, there's a lot of similarities to how they prepare themselves, how they deal with stress, how they deal with those competitive situations. So you can take a lot of that, I think, and apply it in this
Nice.
sector. Um, so yes, I mean, I think what's really interesting is that kind of almost like I suppose the mindset aspect of it. I mean, my daughter was lucky enough a few months ago to go over to the Rafael Nadal Tennis Academy in Mallorca.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
part of what they were doing as part of the tennis coaching was, they call it building a champion. So they were doing the kind of mindset thing. So I was speaking to her about what they were telling her, and it was fascinating, because yeah, a lot of that I was like, this is great. I can use some of this in my role, and which you don't think when you send somebody away to do tennis coaching, that's going to be what it is. But there was the kind of psychological and that
Mm.
aspect of it, which was really, really interesting. So I do like that side of things as well. So understanding a lot of sports people, and kind of taking some of that commonality of what they've learned and then applying it into my job. So yeah, that's the keen interest.
No, that's brilliant. If you had a chance to be a superhero, sorry, or have superpowers,
Mm.
what would you be, or what superpowers would you have?
Um, I think I'd be invisible. I'd like to be invisible if that was a superpower, because I think sometimes you kind of want to just say, "Right, I just don't want to be seen. I don't want to be here. I just want to kind of take a moment to be
Yeah.
kind of, to kind of get away from it." But yeah, invisibility cloak or something like that would be great. That would be great. I would just be able to say, okay, I'm not here. I'm not around. Particularly when some people are trying to get a hold of you and you're really busy and you're like, no, I'm invisible right now. You can't see me. So I think the invisibility cloak would be good. And yeah, particularly around my children when they're asking me for money to buy something, the invisibility cloak would come in extremely handy. But yeah, that would be an awesome superpower.
Awesome, awesome. If you had to ask the audience a question, what would that be?
These are good questions. These are very good questions. I'm impressed with these, Gemma. I'll ask them a question. I think I would probably say why. So if somebody was obviously kind of giving you information and you're trying to understand what they're talking about, I would always say why. Ask more about, well, why is that important? Why is that a thing? What's the reason for that? And just probe a little bit more. So again, back to the listening. So just getting as much context. So I always, yeah, I think sometimes you can answer a question and you don't really have the whole context. So you want to understand the full context of the information you've got so that you can then answer that question, competently. So for me, and I do this to people all the time. I challenge people on things and say, well, why would you do that? Why is that important to you? Why would you not do it this way? And just almost like just challenging people to, and sometimes that it might be the right approach, but just to get them to think a little bit differently. So yeah, I would say that can be a bit mischievous like that sometimes, though, just to say, well, why would you want to do that? And it might be the right approach or the right way to do it, but yeah. So again, that kind of probing and constantly like wanting to understand, everything, that thirst for knowledge about everything before I give an answer or before I can give a response. Want to make sure that I've got a full understanding of what the question is. But yeah, so that would be slightly mischievous answer.
Awesome. No, that's a great nugget upon all the other nuggets within this podcast. And just to finalize the podcast, any last words from yourself?
No, just a big thank you to you. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to actually have that reflection as well. I think I look at what I'm doing now versus what I'm doing 25 years ago, and although it's massively changed, the ethos and the methodology of kind of getting out of bed in the morning hasn't really changed. It's still the same thing. So I've really enjoyed it, working with teams, working individually, working with different sectors, working with different collaborating with different people within an organization. And I've worked for some of the biggest organizations on the planet, and I've worked with some smaller organizations as well, so a good bit of variety. But yeah, I hope the next 5 years ahead is as successful as the last few years have been. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Gemma. Thank you again for the invite to speak at the podcast.
Oh no, it's been awesome, and thank you for taking the time out. Like you mentioned before, quite rightly mentioned, you have a busy schedule, busy day, team to to manage and lead and all the rest of it. So but absolutely loved all of what you said in this podcast. I think I loved the whole kind of way you look at things holistically, the whole mindset, body, energy, all of that good stuff. And there's a lot of takeaways for a lot of people in this podcast. So thank you so much.
No worries. At least if people that are listening to it can take a little nugget or something and go, "That's really good. I really like that. I'm going to use that." Then that's great. So yeah, that's good. I'm happy with that.
No, brilliant. Thank you so much, Craig, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Gemma. You too. Thanks.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.